and thank you very much for taking some time out on a, what is it, Tuesday evening. And some people, I even understand it's on their birthday coming here. Thank you very much for that. We've got a few things to cover today. We're here to learn about how solar energy works. We're going to just do a little 101 on solar. Talk a little bit about solar ownership and some of the economics related to that. And then our real focus is on the MREA group buy campaign, which is really what we're focusing on here. And we'll talk about that, how it, whoops, uh-oh. And it's back. We'll talk about that, how it works and how it saves money and how you can engage in that. So that's our agenda for today. So first, a little bit about MREA. I am not with MREA, I'm helping them out. MREA is a nonprofit organization. They're headquartered in Custer, Wisconsin. For those of you that may have heard of the Energy Fair that's also held in Custer, that's their event. And they exist to advocate and promote renewable energy, particularly solar. They do a lot of solar training. They put on group buy campaigns like this. And so they're just entirely mission focused. Who am I? I'm Ted Redmond. I'm with Pale Blue Dot. I'm an architect and an urban planner, and I'm focused entirely now on climate planning and renewable energy planning. And I'm helping out MREA in some of these presentations, and I also served on as a volunteer on their committee that put this RFP together. Okay, so first a little bit about a little cool stuff about solar. It's cool to me, hopefully it's cool to you, but I am a geek, so it may not be. First, just a few tidbits of facts. To date, we have about 64 gigawatts of solar capacity installed in the United States. Another little tidbit, so solar's been around for about 40 years, give or take, a little bit longer, but installation started about 40 years ago. And it took from the very first installation up until 2016 for us to get 1 million installations in this country. Between the end of 2016 through the beginning of this year, we doubled that. We now have 2 million installations. That is how fast solar is advancing in the last handful of years, certainly, but 10 years at least. The other thing I'd like to point out is Minnesota is currently ranked number 5 in the country for solar. Depends on how you shake it out. There's one's ranking is on job, the other is on capacity installed, the other is on future capacity. Installation rates and so forth. But Minnesota is always in the top 10 for certain, top 5 usually. And so that dispels one myth that oftentimes folks will talk about, which is solar doesn't work well in cold climates, it doesn't work well in a snowy climate. That is not true. Solar works very well in a cold climate. Minnesota is a fantastic solar state. We don't get as much sun as, say, in Arizona, but we get plenty of sun, and they're very effective here. So just to dispel that myth in case you've got that uncle that comes to dinner every once in a while. Okay, and the other thing to point out, we've had 14% growth last year and expected 14% growth again this year. Okay, so I mentioned gigawatts, that we had about 64 gigawatts installed. The last quarter of last year, we had 4 gigawatts installed in that quarter alone. But everybody's like, well, okay, that's cool, what's a gigawatt? Well, a gigawatt is 1,000,000 kilowatts. It's enough to power about 190 homes, or roughly equal to the city of Minneapolis. So last quarter of last year, it was 4 times that much that was installed in the United States. It's pretty amazing. Okay, I also like to talk a little bit about environmental benefits of solar. It's what I do for a living, it's what I care about. So if it's not of your interest, just bear with me. But for every solar panel that's installed, over its lifespan, it's going to reduce about 10,600 pounds of greenhouse gas emissions. That's equivalent to about 94,000 cubic feet of man-made atmosphere that is going to be not produced because of the solar panel, every single solar panel. So just as a sense of scale, that little exclamation mark is me down there next to the 94,000 cubic foot of greenhouse gas. Also, every solar panel will eliminate the use of about 69,000 gallons of water, or roughly 232 households worth of annual water use. Now that's not going to come off your water bill. It's coming off our collective water use, and it's because of what's called the energy-water nexus. Electrical energy in particular is very water intensive. If you think of a coal plant, natural gas plant, they're using steam, and they consume tons of water. Solar panels consume just a little bit of water in their manufacture, and maybe if you wash it every once in a while. But aside from that, they don't use water, so it's a significant reduction in our collective water consumption, which is an important impact. Okay, so a little bit of solar basics, and I will say, feel free to interrupt me at any time if you got a question. Otherwise, I just keep rolling, but feel free to raise your hand, blurt anything out. Yes, sir, already, he's got a thinker.
Earlier before I missed it. When you said PV module,
Yes.
is that like one for a whole house, or?
No, that's a great question. So when we talk about one module, that would be the smallest component that you see when you see an array up on a house. Sometimes we call it a panel, but in reality, panels are actually when you have multiple modules put together. But we'll use those terms interchangeably often, those of us that talk about solar, but it's the smallest component. So that, you know, that chunk of the panels at roughly 3.5 feet by 5.5 feet. So one of those. Okay. Okay, so a little bit of solar basics, just so we have a sense of what we're talking about. I like to start off with terminology. This may not be a great clarification, but I'd like to point out 3 terms because they are all used in what we talk about with solar, and they're related, but they're not exactly interchangeable, and they sound kind of confusing for those of us that are not electrical engineers. So the first term is watt, and that is a measure of instantaneous power. Okay, so it happens immediately, and it's a measure of power, and it is the base. Frequently, it's the base unit that we will talk about the cost for a solar array. The solar array costs $3.10 per watt, okay? A kilowatt is simply 1,000 of those. So it's also a measure of instantaneous power. And a kilowatt is what we frequently will talk about the size or the capacity of an array. So we'll say, well, that house has a 5 kilowatt array on it. It means its capacity is 5 kilowatts. So when the sun's shining at its maximum, it can produce up to 5 kilowatts of instantaneous power, okay? The third term is the kilowatt hour. So now the kilowatt hour is that power extended over time, over an hour. So it's energy use, it's consumption of energy. And that is what we typically hear when we talk about electricity, and that's what our utilities charge us by, is by the kilowatt hour, okay? A kilowatt hour and a kilowatt in capacity are not interchangeable. One, if you have a 5 kilowatt array, it's not going to give you 5 kilowatt hours of energy. It'll give you much more than that. So I just like to clear that up because you'll hear those terms and it's easy to get confused. Okay, so a little bit about how the panel itself works. Again, so I'm an architect, so I'm I'm only so intelligent, so I usually explain things really simply. But so basically the solar panel has a glass face, and then behind it there's 2 plates. And those plates have an electric charge, okay? And the sun, actually the ultraviolet light passes through the glass panel, and the photons literally strike the electrons in the upper plate and jog them loose. And then they move to the other plate, creating a flow of electrons. So now we've got electric flow. What's produced is what we call direct current electricity, as opposed to alternating current, which is what we get when we stick things into our outlets. Okay? So the panels are producing direct current electricity. Then we talk a little bit about mounting systems. Once we have our panels, we have to mount them to something. The most common mounting is a rooftop mounting system. It'll pull it up off the roof, typically about 6 inches or so, just to create some airflow underneath the panels. The roof mounting systems are designed to take the same kind of wind loading and snow loading and structural loading that your roof is designed to. They have to meet those same kinds of standards. Some of the considerations when we go to a roof-mounted system are things like, what's the condition of your roof? Is it structurally sound and capable of carrying the array? Usually the answer is yes, but we want to make sure if it's sagging or something like that, we may want to consider that. And secondly, and most importantly, what's the condition of the roof material itself? Are your shingles in good shape? Are they nearing the end of their life? If so, you want to replace the roof material before you put the array on, because you don't want to put an array on a building and then take it off in 2 years to replace the roof, because that's really expensive. It's just not a good economic solution. Another way to mount solar panels, solar array, is on a ground mount system. That's also available through this Group I, although it's very rarely done in residential formats. But it's a possibility. It allows us to select a part of the site that has the greatest sunlight. Maybe your house has, or your office building has significant shading on it, but it has a great patch of land that has great sunlight. So a ground mount solution can be used. They're typically for larger arrays than what a residential scale is, but they can be used at residential scale. Okay, so we have our panels. We have them mounted on our roof. The rest of the system consists of an inverter, which is the first stop our electrons make when they're coming out of the solar panel. The inverter takes the direct current electricity I spoke about and converts it into alternating current, the kind of electricity that we can eat in our homes, in our office buildings. So the electricity goes to the inverter, becomes alternating current. From there it goes to your panel. And if you have an electric draw in your house at that moment, you got your lights on, your refrigerator's running, whatever, the electrons are going to go straight into your house and feed whatever electric draw you have going on. If those panels are producing more electricity than what you need at that moment, it'll go through a meter and out into the grid. It'll go into my house or his office building or whatever, okay? So basically, and that's called a grid-tied system, and that's really what we're talking about through this group purchase campaign. And what we're basically doing is we're using the grid for electric storage. Okay, we're becoming a provider of electricity to Excel, for instance. Okay, a little bit more about that inverter that converts the electricity from DC to AC. In this particular Group I campaign, the inverter that's been proposed also provides monitoring so that you can actually track the performance of the each solar panel, in fact, each solar module, as well as the overall array. So you can compare from day to day, week to week, hour to hour, even if you want to, how the array is performing, and it'll identify when there's an issue. You know, if you start seeing a red panel start to go from green to red, you know that it's not performing very well. Yes, sir?
So these would be microinverters? Is that what?
No, this is a string inverter, right?
We use optimizers on each panel, which have some of the same monitoring characteristics.
Okay, because I'm just curious how you can read
The optimizer allows that to happen.
The power optimizer, okay.
Yeah, that's the most common. Going to a microinverter, so the difference is a great question. So inverters can convert the electricity at a larger scale where we're collecting up all sorts of panels all at the same time, or you can do it at a microinverter, which is every panel will have its own inverter. And a microinverter is a great solution if you have really wonky exposure where your sunlight's going all over the place, you got lots of shading, and you got one panel that's great right now, but a half an hour later the next one. I mean, so that sort of situation, microinverters are good. But it's a lot more componentry going on, and it's a much more efficient system to have a string inverter with optimizers, because the optimizers help the inverter kind of track the information coming out of the panels. Yes, sir?
So this inverter system is directly tied into the grid. Is there a storage capacity that can be added to it?
That's a great question, and no. It isn't a part of the base package, if you will. You can always add storage to your solar system, though. But it's not a part of what we'll talk about as a base project.
Okay.
And that'll come up again. That's a great question, and it's a good thing to keep in mind. Okay, and the monitoring system is available. You can put it onto your phone, look it up online, and basically watch it all day long if you want. I don't encourage that, but I do suggest that it is nice to get in the habit of looking at it intermittently, so you get a sense as to how your array performs, so that you can recognize when something's whacked up. You know, you can figure it out, and then call up his group to say, hey, we need some help. Okay, a little bit more on utility connected systems, and I'm going to play right into that gentleman's question. So these systems are what we call net metered, which means that the utility is tracking the electricity going in both directions. When we supply electricity, it's tracking it. When we consume electricity off the grid, it's tracking it. And what happens is at the end of the month, it gets trued up. If I consume 1,000 kilowatt hours and I provide 1,000 kilowatt hours, it zeroes out and I have zero electric cost. I may have other bill costs on my bill. You know, you've got a metering cost and whatever, the charges at the bottom. Those still exist, but the electric cost gets zeroed out. Okay, so they're going to true it up every month. The thing to know, though, is that in a net metered situation, a grid-connected situation, if the utility goes down, if the electric power goes down, the power line 2 blocks from your house gets cut off, if your house would have lost electricity, it will still lose electricity. And that's because when the grid is down, it's a code requirement that the solar array has to shut off. It has to stop sending electricity into the grid. And that's so that if there's line workers working on the line, we don't electrocute them because they won't know that your house has solar necessarily, right? You can get around, so that means that if you want to keep your house functional in an emergency when the grid's out, you can do that, but you have to add a battery system. And you can add a battery system, but it's the only way to keep your own backup power going. Okay. All right. A little visual about net metering and sort of its value, our ability to exchange with the grid. This is an illustration of a daytime. It could also be the year, frankly, where this blue might be our energy use through time. And if it's a daytime, certainly in the night, we're not producing any electricity, but we're consuming some, perhaps, have lights on, the refrigerator's going, and so forth. Or if it's in the winter months, perhaps we are certainly consuming electricity, but we're not necessarily generating electricity if it's a cold, dark December day. And in the middle of our day or in the middle of our year, we have a lot of power generation capacity. It's very sunny, clear, we're producing a ton of electricity, and maybe it's way more than we need at that moment. Net metering allows us to take advantage of all of the electricity that we produce and squish it out over time to consume it later, at least from an accounting standpoint, okay? And what's actually happening is Xcel's going to be buying that power from you, and they're going to send it to Minneapolis or whatever, some office building that needs power. You're helping to feed the grid during the middle of the day. Okay. So a little bit more about the MREA group buy. A few things about it. It's a win-win, which I actually do think it's a great win-win scenario. It went through a competitive contractor selection. There's a lot of community-led engagements. We're doing about 20 of these around the Twin Cities. There's strong consumer education, both in terms of what was requested and provided by the selected contractor, but also the fact that MREA is a part of this. They're more than happy to answer questions. They're an independent party to help just be responsive to anything that people have. So there's different ways of getting educated through this process. And very importantly, it provides significant cost savings for everybody that gets involved into it. It is a limited time offering, and we'll talk about that. It's open to homeowners, to businesses, to nonprofits. It starts with a no-cost site assessment and no obligation site assessment that is a proposal for your particular situation. If you proceed, it definitely includes proper design and installation. There is financing available, as well as an option for those that would be interested in an all-American made product. That is an available option. The base option is what I would call a global made product. It's a product that actually the company that makes it does have a factory in the United States. They have materials coming from Japan and I don't know where else, China, Germany, I'm not sure where. But it's truly a global product, like buying a car. But there is an option for all-American for those that are interested in that. And as I said, reduced cost for everyone, which we'll explain in a second. Sign up goes through the end of September. So the program's open until then for people to engage it. So the way the reduced costs work is, first of all, it was, as I said, it was a competitive selection process. An RFP was put out. And then contractors that submitted were reviewed and selected competitively. The base cost, I would say, is a competitive number. It's $3.17 a watt. So if just one person signed up, that person will pay $3.17 a watt. Okay. The way the RFP was put together, it requested for proposed reductions such that as we hit milestones of so much capacity installed, what kind of a discount would the contractor provide for everybody that was involved? And so True North proposed a 7-cent reduction for each one of these goals. So when we hit 50 kilowatts of installed capacity, it drops to 310. When we hit 150 kilowatts, it reduces to 303. When we hit 250 kilowatts, it reduces to 296. When we hit 350 kilowatts, it reduces to 289. Just so you know, we've already passed this, and we're coming up hot and heavy on this one right here. We're about 2/3 of the way to the second goal. Last year, we came really close to hitting this goal, by the way, and our pace is actually faster than last year. Yes, sir?
Is that cost for just materials, or is that the entire,
That's installed.
that's the entire install price plus the materials?
Yeah, it's the whole kit and caboodle.
That's the inverter?
Yeah, it's the whole thing. It's hooked. It's designed, installed, submittals, hooked up, communicating to the grid, and the contractors in the truck driving away. Yeah. Okay. So as I say, last year, so these goals are, the 350 goal is a little bit of a stretch because the goal of MREA is to advance solar. So we're trying to advance as much as we can get, right? But the goals aren't crazy either. MREA does group buys all over the place. They have them going on in Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin. And last year, they had a total of 3,800 kilowatts installed through their group buy campaigns. There was a campaign just like this in the Twin Cities last year, and it installed 232 kilowatts. So you can see it's almost at that third goal. It's pretty darn close. The thing I like to point out, because I am a geek, is those 232 homes, there was a total savings of $70,000 for those families that participated, those groups. And the installations are going to save over 7.5 million pounds of greenhouse gases and almost 48.5 million gallons of water. It's a pretty successful campaign, I would say. So that 350 is a little bit of a stretch. Just tell your neighbors to start looking into this, and then we'll get there, and everybody saves. Okay, so a little bit about the contractor selection. There was an advisory committee that was put together. I was one of the volunteers on that. There were 5 or so of us doing that. We put together an RFP, and it got issued, and we had a number of responses back. A couple of them we excluded because they weren't actually fully responsive. They didn't give us everything that we asked for in the RFP. And then we reviewed those contractors that met all of the requirements and selected based on the criteria of experience, capacity, because these kinds of programs are not easy to do. If you're a very small outfit, it can be very hard to keep up. Their product selection, they had minimum quality levels that they needed to meet, and they illustrated that. Their warranties that were offered, and in the case of this selected contractor, True North actually offered an expanded warranty. Those systems, typically, you know, the panels and the inverters are really what are your primary concern on warranties. Panels are now more or less almost always 25-year warranties. Some of them are 20-year, most of them are 25-year. And the way those are warrantied is that they'll project out performance over time. So that they say at 10 years and at 25 or 20 years and at 25 years, this is how much energy production your panels will be functioning at. Because a panel does reduce its efficiency over time to about 20, 25 years, and then that reduction starts to shallow out. So they're guaranteeing what the energy production is going to be. So if your monitors tell you that it's not performing at the right level, that's an issue, and you can get the manufacturer to replace that. But the inverters are frequently at a 15-year warranty. And really, the panels you don't really change out. I mean, they have a long lifespan. Inverters will get changed. Inverter is what gets replaced. And inverters typically have a 15-year warranty, and True North offered as a base cost a 25-year warranty on their inverter. So for this, purchasers in this program, they get a 25-year warranty for both inverter and panels, which we thought was a great value. And also their customer service plan was a key aspect of selection. They had a very clear proposal for how they were going to communicate to buyers and what kind of package they would receive and answer questions and so forth. Yes, sir?
How will they handle hail and heavy winds?
How well do the panels handle hail and heavy winds? Well, so from a code requirement, the panels and the anchoring systems, the mounting systems are all required to meet the same design requirements as your roof, okay? So all of the requirements that your roof is supposed to stay in place in terms of heavy wind, your panels are also supposed to do that. They can get blown up. If your house gets hit with a tornado, you know, there's limitations to physical reality, but they are very tough things. In terms of the hail, they're actually very durable. In fact, there's a number of stories where homes getting hit with hail or buildings getting hit with hail and the panels are fine, but the roof next to it gets damaged and needs to be replaced. I can't guarantee that that's the way performance always is, but they are very tough components. In fact, it's kind of cool if you Google hail test solar panel. There's some cool videos out there slamming golf balls into panels, you know, going 300 miles an hour or whatever. It's really amazing what they can do. Yes, sir?
In that vein, do you know, you may not, but do you know if insurance companies are covering it just as they would the roof if you have damage?
That's a great question. And so the typical answer is no, unless you get a rider for the panels. So if anybody that's interested in moving forward, once you do the site assessment and you decide you want to go forward, and you tell True North, okay, let's get into this, the next call I would make is to your insurance agent and have them explore riders or options for insurance. Most insurance companies now, like 10 years ago, a lot of insurance companies didn't know what to do with the solar array. Now a lot of them are ready for that. They know exactly what the risks are. They know exactly how to price it. They know how to talk you through it. And I can't tell you what your specific insurance carrier will charge, but I do know that, I've heard commonly, $50, $70, $75, maybe as high as $100 a year, but they're usually economical. But you definitely want coverage because something that's outside of the warranty, you want to make sure your insurance has covered. Yes, sir?
The warranty that you were mentioning that the company offers for performance, is that prorated by age of the panel then, or how is the module?
Yes, yeah, for the module performance, it's basically on the literature that you get from the manufacturer, there's a little wedge. And it shows the panel performance stepping down and the line that they're warrantying the performance for. Yeah, so that at year 10 or whatever, it's going to say X% compared to day one. Do you want to clarify?
Yeah, I can help you on that one too. So it's rated for 0.5% per year. So after the first year, it's 99.5%, and 90%, and so on. So after 20 years, it's 10% max. And actually, they warrant that it won't be higher than some percentage after 25 years. Does that answer your question? Yeah, I think so. Okay.
Good. Okay. All right. So as I said, it was a competitive selection. The team that was selected was True North, and Steve's here as a representative of True North. You want to share a little bit about True North?
Sure. So right now we're actually, I know we're at 100 kW, so we're pretty sure we're gonna make that second milestone, and almost well, not positive. We're pretty sure we're gonna make the third. We're positive we're gonna make the second. We're pretty sure we're gonna make the third, and the fourth. I don't know if it's a stretch. We're really, really busy right now. True North was started by Marty Morud about 10 years ago. It was a challenge by his father to build a solar array, because he's kind of a geek too. He actually worked for Medtronic for a number of years, and to put one on his farm up in Bemidji. So he and his brother built one, and then neighbors saw what a cool job they'd done, and so they started contracting. Well, he's also a good businessman too, which actually worked out really well. He found he was having more fun doing this than he was at Medtronic, so he decided to do this instead. And also because he's also dedicated to the mission, which I'm going to paraphrase because this one is pretty long. This is the one he puts in the employee handbook. Our mission reflects our relentless passion for the stewardship of the planet and our dedication to leadership in creating a cleaner energy future. So he's dedicated to two parts. One is, because people are doing this for different reasons. Some are doing it because it's environmentally wise, some are doing it because it's fiscally wise. This is a place where you can do both and actually come out quite far ahead, because it's a really fast payback with the way that the MREA program is set up. Why True North? Actually, it's because we are one of the best in the region. Many of our competitors would say we are too. We've been doing this very effectively, so we don't always charge the least amount. In fact, it's 6 of one, half dozen the other with our largest competitors. But we are known that we're going to get it done right, and you're going to get quality done when you come on, and because we actually have a 5-part process for ensuring and then turning on your system at the end that you're satisfied. And you actually are the one who signs off. The last payment won't be made until you are totally satisfied. And that little monitoring system that he had up there is working, and you can see the panels doing their job. I think you've got the clicker here. We're done. Oh, I think this is where you take over. But yeah, we do have licensed electricians on site. We also have a master electrician. We do the no-cost solar site assessment. I'm actually one of the people who does that. And that usually starts off with your electric bill. We ask that you send in 12 months of your last 12 months. And that's the only way that we can properly evaluate your system for what you're going to need going further. And it also fills in the guidelines that Xcel Energy will require. So we can't build a system greater than 120% of your prior year's usage. And he'll talk more about why you might want to do that, because it actually you can actually have Xcel Energy paying you for your electricity beyond your bill. And so yeah, we'll design your system. We'll first do a general proposal that lays out the panels on your roof using your best solar window. And then if you approve of what we've done, we then send it to our design team, who makes sure that we did our job properly. And we do take care of all the permitting. And then we also will actually lay out precisely what your incentives will be, so that when you actually do see the proposal, you'll know exactly how much you're going to pay, how much you're going to save, and how fast you'll pay this back over time. And then we do build and make sure it interconnects with Xcel Energy.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just curious, so does True North also do like a services department? So like after you get the array built, is there a place where like you could call in and ask about, oh, my inverter blew or something?
So
for services.
it's really, there's really not a lot of problems with solar panels, actually. They usually don't fail. We don't actually have a maintenance contract that we've set up, but we're talking about doing it. But if you call True North, we'll take care of your problem, and we'll set you where you want to go. We don't want anyone. We want our systems operating. So yeah, we'll follow up and we'll take care of it.
Cleaning or something? Or cleaning?
There are companies who do cleaning. And it's really not that expensive. It's like cleaning your windows. And a lot of times they're self-cleaning because the snow literally kind of goes right off of them. But yeah, it's probably over a certain amount of years you'll probably want to do it just to keep your performance up.
And then I'll just add that we have used your online system where you can look, on your phone, to make sure those panels are running. And we've noticed, there was at one point where we did see a couple of the panels we weren't getting any energy in there. And yeah, we contacted them and it was like a week before everything was fixed, so
Yeah.
pretty short amount of time before everything was back up and running, so, yeah,
Thanks, Lauren.
thank you.
Okay, so the first thing, if you decide to go with the no cost and no obligation site assessment, the first thing you know of is you're gonna have to dig up some utility bills. So if you're like me and you don't have them around, you can just go to Excel, you can give them a call, or you can go to Excel online under My Account, and then go to My Usage, and then click on the table view, and then get 12 months of history. And the reason for that, they'll want to know your kilowatt usage as well as the cost, but so that they can design a system that's appropriate for your house and your conditions. We don't want to design, if you use 10,000 kilowatt hours and you could put a 10,000 kilowatt hour system on your house that's a good performer, that's the best thing for you to do. But on the other hand, we don't want to give you a 30 kilowatt system if you only need a 2 kilowatt system, right? So we want to make sure that it relates with your usage. Little.
We put those same instructions in our initial contact.
This information here,
They put
yeah,
site assessment,
Yeah.
site assessment, we actually
Yeah.
do that same.
yeah. So Steve will follow up if you're interested. You'll follow up with this contact info too if you don't get it here. Okay, so a little bit about economics on solar ownership. We'll start off kind of globally. That isn't directly related to this group buy campaign. There have been a number of studies here in the last handful of years about the economics of solar homes. Two of them that we're going to mention. The first is Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory did a study surveying 6 states. And from that study, they determined a consistent willingness on buyers' behalf to pay more for solar homes over comparable properties. Another study here is the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, did a study of, I think it was 8 states. And they discovered the same thing, and in fact, that solar homes tended to sell 20% faster than comparable properties in the same market. And they tended to garner about 17% more on purchase price than comparable properties in the same market. So it's a good investment if you think you might sell your home in the next number of years. It is a positive investment there as well. There are a few incentives that are important in this process and reflected in your proposals that you get back. The first two I'm going to talk about don't show up anywhere, but I think it's important for you to know. The first one is sales tax. You don't see sales tax on a solar array. It's because the state of Minnesota has excluded sales tax for solar array. So that's a good thing. Congratulate our legislators for making a good decision there. The second incentive, if you will, is property tax. In the state of Minnesota, they cannot account for your solar array in the property valuation of your home. Once it sells and the property value went up because the property value went up and solar maybe contributed to that, then of course the property value gets reflected in future assessments. But in terms of actually calling out the solar array and adding that to the value of your house, cannot be done in the state of Minnesota. So go Minnesota. The Big Daddy incentive is, oops, darn it, I keep doing that. The Big Daddy incentive is the federal tax credit. This is a tax credit, not a tax deduction. So for those that are sort of tax savvy, it doesn't reduce your tax basis, it reduces your tax liability. So if your incentive is a $7,000 incentive and you happen to owe $7,000 in taxes, you now don't owe it at all. Okay, so it's actual cash back to you. It is stepping down. Yes, sir.
Is that a one-time deal?
It is. It's a one-time deal.
Is it amortizable?
It's one incentive, and it can be carried over up to 5 years. So if it's a total for your given property, let's say it's a total of $7,000, it can be carried over for up to 5 years, depending on whatever your tax liability is. Okay. Yes, sir.
So this is assuming a next year build?
Yes, yeah, and we're doing that because, you know, the incentive does step down, okay? So for 2019, it's a 30% incentive. For 2020, it's a 26% incentive. For 2021, it goes to 22%. And then the year after that, I think it goes to 15%. And then for residential, I think it disappears. For commercial, it stays at 10% after that. So we're showing 2020 because that's a conservative thing. Maybe it's possible to get it in this year, but I know their schedule's getting booked up, and it might be more like a January install or a February install, probably. They'll tell more about that as they work with you. Yes, sir.
There's no tied number of units sold like there are for vehicles?
On the incentive?
Yeah.
No, it's just straight. If you invest in solar, you get that credit, provided you have the tax capacity. It's the only hitch. If somebody has no tax liability, then they can't get the tax credit. But assuming you pay taxes, you can get it. Yes, sir.
When you say system costs, what does that refer to? The entire bill for
Yeah, the entire total package for the solar array would be included.
the solar, so installation?
Yeah, the whole thing, your total bill
Okay.
that would come out of the deal, that gets applied.
Gotcha.
Okay. Okay, so that's the Big Daddy incentive. The second incentive is the solar rewards. So we're all in Excel territory here, I think, right? So Excel, you can connect with Excel in two ways. The first way for a house is not the smart way, and that is just under their net metering interconnections, okay? And in that instance, any power that you don't consume over a month, for instance, if you provide more power than you consume, they'll pay you for it. Under a typical net metering, it's not very much. It's like 4 or 5 cents a kilowatt hour. That's really for large units. For a residential array, any array that's 40 kilowatt in capacity or smaller, which is well in the zone of a residential, in fact, the number of commercial properties would still be below a 40 kilowatt array. They will not only net meter, so they're tracking all the power and they're going to true it up on your bill, but they're also going to, in addition to that, pay you for every kilowatt hour that your array produces. And the reason why they're doing that is they are buying from you the green attributes of your power, also known as a renewable energy credit, a REC, okay? And so a REC, it's a little cerebral, but so electrons go everywhere. You know, electron comes out of a power plant and who knows where it goes. I don't know if it goes to your house or my house or down the street. We don't know where it goes. And so with renewable energy, when we started producing renewable energy and putting it into the grid, people realized, well, I want to track that because I care about renewable energy. So the renewable energy credit is assigned to all of the electricity that goes out of a renewable energy installation into the grid so that we can track the electrons that go out there, right? And then corporations or individuals that want to buy renewable energy, but they can't put a solar panel on their house or on their building, or like 3M, you may have heard, is going to go 100% renewables. Part of their solution is going to be to buy renewable energy credits. They get the right to say that they've used renewable energy, even though we don't really know where their electrons came from, because we can't. So Excel is actually buying the renewable energy credits through this system. So they're incentivized to pay you. So they're going to pay you for every kilowatt hour that's produced, regardless of who uses it. Even if it goes into your house, they don't care. They're going to pay you for it. It lasts for 10 years, okay? And then after that, it'll switch to a traditional net metering system, okay? And for 2019, the incentive under solar rewards is 7 cents a kilowatt hours, and it goes for 10 years. The program will be around next year also. I can't tell you if it's going to be 7 cents a kilowatt hour or 6.5 or 6 3/4 or 6. We don't know what that is yet. It could change from 7 cents though, just you know. Okay, so throwing together some of those numbers for a relatively typical sized array of about 7.5 kilowatt hours, array. You have a total base price at our base $3.17, which we were already beating now because we're past that first mark. But at the highest price under this program, $3.17, The total cost for the array is $23,695. Okay, so that's out of the package. Contractor just drove off. That's the price. The incentives then get stacked into it. We've got the federal ITC, 26% back, cash back, gives you $6,100, and that you get back, as soon as you file your taxes for that tax year, and you get your return. So it's not instantaneous, but it's short-term payback. The next level then is the solar rewards, which I just talked about. At 7 cents a kilowatt hours, over 10 years, this array would harvest $6,224 in solar rewards payments. That is over 10 years. So roughly 1/10 of that every year. The third then is the rebate as a part of this group purchase campaign. So I talked about those step-down levels. Those get sent out to you as a rebate. So once all of the arrays are in place, sometime in April or whatever next year, True North will provide a report about how many arrays are in place, how many kilowatts are installed, and we'll be kind of knowing along the way anyways. You'll get updates, kind of where they're at. And then they'll true out all their accounting and send folks a check for the difference between their contract price and wherever we end up on those incentives. So if we hit the max, that's $2,100 back. So the net cost after those incentives is $9,211. So what we haven't talked about is annual performance. Okay, so that's all base incentives to get to net cost. In this house, their first year output was 8,900 kilowatt hours. Their annual energy cost before doing this was just shy of $1,500. Their annual energy cost after doing this array dropped to $281, which is an annual savings of $1,200 a year, which means then that net cost gets paid back in 7.7 years for this home. Okay, and this is a pretty typical. If you have a equally performing home, you've got good solar exposure and so forth, the numbers are going to look exactly the same. The numbers look typically the same. The only thing that starts changing is this number might change if you have certain shading conditions. If you have lots of big trees, the payback might be stretched out a bit. Okay. So this we usually put in just to say, hey, these goals aren't crazy, and illustrating that just if you have 8 homes, we've already crushed the first goal. We're already past that, and we're pushing our way to the second goal. And this is just another way of looking at the total costs. Again, the base of $317 a watt, milestones at 50, 150, 250, and 350. Each one drops 7 cents. And out of that total pie of the cost, the federal ITC gets you 26% back. The solar rewards gets you another 26% back. If we hit that fourth level, the incentive for this program gets you another 9% back, and it leaves just 39% as a net cost to you. Okay. Yes.
Are all of these rebates, are they taxed as well, like when you get checks in the mail?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a superb question, and I don't know. I don't know if you know. You definitely should talk to your accountant about that. This one's not going to be, I don't believe.
Yeah.
This is technically income, but I don't know I don't know how it's reported or how it's tracked or what the intent is.
I have a solar array, so I know for sure. That was a question I had before. But yeah, from my understanding is that the solar rewards is not a taxable income. Maybe if you produce more than you sell back, that margin.
Maybe, yeah.
But I think actually the solar rewards on the renewable energy credit is not.
Okay. Well, it's good. You can definitely stump me really readily on accounting questions. So, so I encourage you to talk to your accountant because I'm not sure. Yes, ma'am.
How does it physically work if the solar panels aren't on your house?
So like if you had a ground mount array?
Ground mount, or I have a detached garage that gets sun.
Well, whether it's on your roof or on your garage or on a ground mount or wherever it may end up going, that diagram that I showed where we're going to have a wire that comes out of the panels and it's going to go to the inverter and then to your meter, your panel and then the meter, that'll all still happen. It just might be the routing of the wires might be different. So,
Just trench it or something?
yeah.
Yeah.
Or depending on your meter, I mean, or who knows? I mean, under some circumstances, you might even decide it's worth putting another meter in or something like that. I don't know. I can't see where that's probably the case in most homes here in St. Louis Park, but all those parts are still going to be there. It just might be the distance might be different.
Sure. So, a related question, if you have a ground mount, can you share it with your neighbor?
That's a superb question, and no, it comes down to what the interpretations of the utilities are, and Excel is not going to let you share between ownerships, and it won't allow you to send electricity over property lines unless it's the same owner under both. The only way you can do shared like that is under the community solar program, which is a developer can develop a large array and then sell shares in the array to multiple people. And for a community solar, it has to have at least 5 what they call off-takers, 5 people, 5 groups taking the power. So can't do it at a residential scale. But you can tell your neighbor to sign up. And then you're kind of sharing. You're sharing on the savings. So, okay. Any other questions there?
You could just trench an extension cord that never know.
Yeah, that's right. I don't want to hear. I'm not saying you can do it, but yeah. It's your.
Well, we're in a condo association with some large buildings that would be theoretically really good for putting solar on, but we're also individually metered. Is there any way around that situation that you can see?
So this.
Shared roof? Are you
It's-
talking about a shared roof?
Yes.
No,
Sure.
it can't be done.
It
Can't
cannot
be
be done.
No, it cannot be done. You have to have individual ones, and usually in those things, the homeowners associations have bylaws that prevent it. And so it gets to be difficult. We've had very few of those situations work out,
Yeah, okay,
unfortunately.
yeah.
Yeah.
You could look into doing a community solar, though. That might be what she was talking about. You could look into developers doing a small scale community solar. I don't know if they'd say yes to that either, but okay. Any other questions on this? Okay. Let's see. We were moving on. So financing options. Certainly, that first big the whole pie is oftentimes a financing challenge. You got to figure out how to cover that, and then you start getting your incentives after that, right? So you can certainly talk to your bank, explore options there if you want financing or need financing. There are other resources. The Center for Energy and Environment, another nonprofit entity, has multiple loan options that are set up for energy efficiency and renewable energy that are favorable. If you're a part of a credit union, you can talk to them about the CU Green loan, and we have actually small pamphlets over there for that. There's also the MFHA fix-up loan program, which is offered in secure and unsecured loans both. And if you're happen to looking at it for a commercial property, a business, there's also MinPace, which is property assisted clean energy, where basically you're borrowing from your property tax to pay off the array. So over 10 years or so, you pay it back off. Can't be done for residential. Bad legislators. Good legislators on the other things. We need solar MinPace for residential, though. Okay, how to participate in the group buy? Sign up. It's pretty easy. On the sign-up sheet, there's 3 squares. One square says solar site assessment, so it's the free site assessment. Just mark that if you're interested, and then they'll contact you in a couple days. The second box on the sign-up sheet said Home Energy Squad visit, which CEE does Home Energy Squad visits. We definitely recommend them. If you haven't done them, it's a great opportunity to reduce your energy expenditures. I think they cost $100, and you get basically $100 worth of stuff out of the deal immediately, and then you get energy savings after that. So I highly recommend it. And then the third box on the sign-up sheet is just to get email updates. So if you're just interested in tracking, they won't send out a ton, but once we hit milestones and so forth, they'll send out updates to everybody. So if you're interested, you can sign up on the sign-in sheet. You can also sign up online at www.solartwincities.org. They will connect with you in a couple of days to get the site assessment going. In the meanwhile, dig up your energy bills so that you can share that with them. They'll do a no-cost site assessment and get it back to you in about a week or so, 7 to 10 days. And then they'll meet with you to review that with you. If you have any questions, if you want to explore options, kick the tires a little bit. And then once you're satisfied through the site assessment, you just decide to proceed, and they'll move on with designing and installing and getting submittals and getting everything hooked up. Okay. And we'll throw this in there. The ways to join MREA, it's a nonprofit entity. They are only mission-oriented for renewable energy. I encourage you to just sign up with them so you get their news information and so forth. It's a good organization. So, great. Any other questions, comments? Anybody got a joke they want to share? Yes, sir.
Maybe, I know, complex question, but like, what would you say in like an elevator pitch to someone who's, either been on like wind source for years versus, doing this investment versus participating in those community solar shares?
Yeah.
At a high level, like, what's the thought process between those options?
Okay, so the question is, what's the difference or advantage, disadvantage of, say, doing wind source, signing up for wind source through Excel, or signing up for a community solar garden, or doing solar on your house like this? And so the first is all of them are good, right? For the purposes that I'm interested in, which is advancing renewable energy, they're all good. So none of them's bad. They all have different financial metrics, though, and ownership considerations. So wind source, you are buying renewable energy credits. Remember I said under the solar rewards, Excel is going to be purchasing those renewable energy credits. When you add wind source to your bill through Excel, you are actually purchasing renewable energy credits. And that's a great thing. That's a good thing. Typically, you end up paying a little bit more for your energy by doing that. The next option is a community solar garden. And I don't know, they usually open up for subscriptions and then they close down. And I don't know how many are currently available. You can find that out, though, if you go to Excel or you just even Google Community Solar Gardens Excel. It'll take you to their right page, and they have a list of all of the community solar gardens in the region. And then they'll identify whether they're open or not. So in short, a community solar garden, you're subscribing as an off-taker. You don't own, and that's okay. Usually the way they're set up is you will save money immediately, and it's usually about 10% maybe, 5 to 12%, something like that, off of your energy costs, and it's flatlined. You'll save that much from here to 20 years out, and that's usually you agree to about a 20-year time frame, and so you do save money, and your savings is capped because you're a subscriber, not an owner. A solar array on your house has the long-term advantage of giving you the greatest possible savings out of those three options. It's by far the greatest savings because, as I indicated under that example, at 7.5 years, after 7.5 years, you have free electricity. So, and all those incentives kind of pay off the cost of the array. And then once you get to about 7.5 years, it'll vary on each case, right? But they'll tell you what your payback is. After that payback period, you have free electricity. So it's long-term savings is the greatest by far of any of them. But it's also got an upfront cost that the other two don't. So, and for instance, the folks that if you can't put solar on your house, you can't put solar on your house. If you just can't do it because you got a skyscraper sitting next to you or whatever, then a community solar is a good option because you're still participating in solar and you can't have it on your property, so it works. Right? Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Oh, I know.
Ah.
So you put solar on your house, and you get a reduced rate that you have to pay, whatever. So you sell your house, does that rate stay with the house for them to learn? Take advantage of?
Yeah, so the solar rewards and the net metering, all of those relationships with the utility stay with the meter, stays with the house. Yeah. You've already pocketed, hopefully, the ITC and the rebate from this program, but the solar rewards, if the program is still going on, stays with the house. Which, by the way, if you do end up selling within that first 10 years, to me, that's one of the first things I'd mention on my sales description of the property, that this thing's got a payback, and you're investing in something that's going to pay you back. Because that's where you'll harvest certainly that 17%, I would assume, that 17% increase in property.
That they have free electricity?
I'm sorry?
Could you advertise it as free electricity for your home?
Well, I don't know how you would, again, talk to your attorney, but I think, there's certainly nothing wrong with, they'll provide you documents that illustrate paybacks and all that. And I would say there's nothing wrong with making that a part of your property documents that you're sharing, if you wanted to, because it's a compelling purchase opportunity. Any other questions?
You pay by credit card?
I don't, yes, you can. Great. Awesome. Well, if you, the sign-in sheets are over there. If you did not check off those boxes and you're interested, just check them off, and Steve will get with you shortly. Great. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.